Square Cow Countdowns. Hello there people, I'm Slash Raptor. Let's get on with the countdown. The topic for this one is the top 10 most disappointing video game sequels. So let's do this thing. And the rules are that the term sequel to me just means what came after the first one. So because of that, both prequels and sequels are good to go. It doesn't matter in the long run anyway. Keep in mind that just because a game is quote-unquote disappointing doesn't mean it sucks or is of poor quality. It's just not as good as the original. And finally, although I have played most of the games on this list, I've included a few games that I haven't played or haven't beaten all the way through to help diversify the list a little bit. So let's do this thing. Number 10. Coincidentally, Uncharted 3 was originally going to be number 3 on this list, but halfway through writing this script, I recently did a marathon and I played Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, and I usually didn't like 3 because when it came out, there was a lot of differences between 2 and 3. The aiming sensitivity starts off much lower, the story is really, really bad in comparison to the original 2. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's kind of predictable. And then the hand-to-hand combat system has been completely revamped. It's more realistic, it's more gritty, it's more involved, it's not as easy. And the first time I played through the game, I hated all that. I wished it had never changed from Uncharted 2. But I played it through again, and I started to appreciate them for what it was, which let me change the location of this game by 7 whole slots. Or would it be 6? I don't know, my math sucks. Let's move on. Number 9. If Resident Evil and Grand Theft Auto had a night of drunken debauchery together, Prototype would be born roughly 9 months later. This game is awesome. It's broken as shit, but awesome. I've never played a game where simply getting from point A to point B was like a roller coaster ride. The game can barely keep up with your character. Prototype 2, however, is a much more refined game that improves on everything the original game lacked. Except the story. That still kinda sucks. And that's why this game is on the list. The best part about the original, in my opinion, was that you moved so fast, it was almost game-breaking. In the second one, everything has been toned down so that it's more like a train ride. I think this is the only instance where fixing a game's flaws took some of the fun out of it. Number 8. There's a difference between a sequel and a spin-off. A sequel is a continuation of something that can sometimes include new things. A spin-off is something that is inspired by one thing to a point where something new is created. In the case of spin-offs, it's usually something totally different that borrows a lot from what inspired it. In this regard, Super Paper Mario should technically be considered a spin-off of the Thousand Year Door, even though most people consider it as a sequel. But how can that be when Thousand Year Door is an RPG and Super Paper Mario is a 2D platformer? See where I'm going with this? This isn't the first time Nintendo has completely changed a game genre just to see what happens. Adventure of Link! And that's really all that prevents this game from being any higher on the list. Because turning a great simple RPG into a 2D platformer should otherwise be considered a crime. Don't get me wrong, Super Paper Mario is not a bad game at all. It's just like a quantum leap or something. Number 7. Ratchet & Clank is a great series. If you want a game full of various weapons and cheap difficulty, then play the PS2 saga. If you want a game with a surprisingly deep story and a much more well-balanced difficulty, then play the Future Trilogy on the PS3. I happen to prefer the PS3 games. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did I say Future Trilogy? Silly me. I meant 2 1/4. That sounds weird, doesn't it? Yeah, well, apparently not to Insomniac. The sequel to Tools of Destruction is DLC only, because it's an episodic minigame. It has everything the first Future game has, except length. You can literally beat the whole game in under 2 hours. What's fun about that? Why did they make a minigame when they could have easily made a full-length one? The story is there. Crack in Time takes place about a year after Quest for Booty. What happened during that year? Nobody will ever know, as it turns out, because the whole second game of what would otherwise have been a full trilogy can be completed in the same amount of time it takes for a herd of giraffes to throw up one after another. What a waste of perfectly good potential. Number 6. I'll give Square Enix, what are they called nowadays? Oh, whatever. I'll give them credit. They definitely know what we want more of. What they don't know, however, is how to give it to us. We asked for Final Fantasy VII to be remade on the PS3, and they gave us a striptease just to show us what the console could do. Anyways, the success of Final Fantasy X told Square Enix that we wanted a sequel, and this time they listened. but not about why we wanted the sequel. Final Fantasy X was well received because it had the sphere grid, an innovative leveling up system, characters with voices, a different way to explore the world, not a big open world map, and no stupid speech bubbles. So naturally, Final Fantasy X-2 would have all that stuff, and then merely continue the story from where it left off. Yeah, as it turns out, it didn't. The story does continue, but the mission-style gameplay makes it progress in a very peculiar way. I mean, there's some missions that have absolutely nothing to do with the story, but you still have to complete them if you want to see one of the 1,000 different endings, all of which are very, very similar anyway. The battle system has been reverted back to the way it was before Final Fantasy X, and what is up with all the cheesiness? Not even turning Yuna and Riku into scantily clad Charlie's Angels is enough to make us overlook this game's flaws. Number 5. God of War is awesome. It's bloody, it's violent, and it was the only game of its kind until Dante's Inferno ripped off of it. So after 2 equally great games on the PS2, PSP owners everywhere were overjoyed to learn that a God of War prequel game was in the works. Mind you, I had to wait until it came out to the PS3. But anyways, Chains of Olympus was nowhere near as good as the first 2. The story is shallow, it's confusing, and it throws off the entire continuity of the series. And that's just one thing. There's no variety in the enemies, there's hardly any puzzles, and the power-ups and weapons are all kind of hit or miss. But easily the worst thing about the game is its length, which might explain why the story is so iffy. It's not as short as Quest for Booty, but it's still pretty short. I know it's a game that was made for a handheld, but if they can make Ghost of Sparta decently long, then there is no excuse for Chains of Olympus, which lands at the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4. In Japan, Super Mario Bros. 2 was the same game as the original, with different levels and an unforgiving difficulty. In America, Super Mario Bros. 2 was a weird-ass black sheep with unforgiving difficulty and no story significance at all, since it all ends up being a dream. Long story short, both of these games deserve to be here. But since both of those games are technically the same game, depending on where you're from, I have to put both of them on here. But since I'm in North America, I'm putting the Super Mario Bros. 2 that we got, which is actually just a Japanese game called Doki Doki Panic that Miyamoto also worked on, but they just, George Lucased it into a Mario game and then gave us that, because I guess they deemed that their version of Super Mario Bros. 2 was too hard for us. And it is hard. We did get the Lost Levels, but that's not really Super Mario Bros. 2, that's a remake of it. And Lost Levels and Super Mario Bros. 2 Japanese version are both ridiculously hard. Actually, I think that Doki Doki Panic Mario version is also extremely hard too. I don't care for any of these games. My favorite Mario games are Super Mario World and Mario Bros. 3. So it's up to you to decide whether the Japanese one or our version of Mario Bros. 2 deserves to be on this list, but because, like I said, they are technically both the same game, I can't be wrong, because they're both on here. Number 3. Resident Evil 5. Oh god. This game is not terrible if you're playing with another person. Otherwise, it is frickin' impossible, because the whole game is designed around co-op, even when you're playing solo, which puts you at a huge disadvantage. If this game had smarter AI for Sheva and Resident Evil 4's inventory system when you're playing in single player, it would be okay, because the story is still kinda weird. But sadly, it doesn't have any of those things, so I put it on the list as number 3. And after Resident Evil 5 came out, people lost faith in the series. And can you blame them? So when 6 came out, people were not really disappointed to learn that 6 was not very good. I never even bought it. I only played the demo. I kind of liked the demo, but I was naive. So I don't think I'm going to buy 6. And let's face it, 5 was more disappointing because we were kind of expecting 6 to be a big bomb. So that's why 5 is on here instead of 6. Number 2. My second favorite fighting franchise used to be Soul Calibur, and Soul Calibur 3 was my all-time favorite of that. It introduced so many new things, like character creation, tournament modes, all those little mini-games, a store system with money, and then the Chronicles of the Sword, and I liked how you could unlock more stuff from at the store through Chronicles of the Sword. I really enjoyed the game. It was awesome. However, it was missing the team battles, but with all this new stuff, I can let that slide. What I cannot let slide, however, is releasing a sequel to such a great game and put absolutely nothing in there. Soul Calibur 4 sucks. What's good about it? The graphics? Okay, yeah. That's about it. The story is just as confusing. It's even shorter. It's like a 5-stage thing, and then there's the Tower of the Souls, which takes about a minute to beat, and then there's the arcade game, which has been there forever, and a character creator. But what good is a character creator when there's no cool mode to play with it? As soon as you beat it with every character, you're done with Soul Calibur 4. That's it. It's boring. So disappointing. Number 1. I don't like World of Warcraft. To be more specific, I don't really like any game that makes you pay more than you have to pay to just buy the game. I think that's ridiculous. Now, if a game like that comes out, I would accept it in one of two ways. The first way is if you didn't have to pay money to purchase the game just to keep playing it on a monthly basis. That would make a lot more sense to me, because that way you're still paying for the privilege of playing it every month, but you also don't have to pay a $60 fee in the beginning, because you've already paid for it that way. That is one way. The other way I would accept it is if there was, actually say something worth doing in World of Warcraft. I'm sorry, guys, but when I played World of Warcraft, it bored the crap out of me. I didn't like it. I thought it was repetitive. I thought it was a complete ripoff, and I didn't like how confined I was in my character. For example, if Skyrim was a pay-as-you-go RPG, I would sign up for it right now, because in Skyrim, even if you start one character, halfway through the game you can decide to change the way your character is going to develop and say, I want to start magic all of a sudden. But you can't do that in World of Warcraft. When you start a character, you're stuck with it till you play through it. And all the expansion packs might add a few things here and there. But from what I experienced of the game, World of Warcraft consisted entirely of starting a character, watching a couple of cinematics, and then entering a town, finding quests, and the quests were nothing but go out into the wilderness, kill 7 of these, bring back 7 of these, and then you kept doing that over and over and over and over again, and it drove me insane. Which is the reason that I think I'm justified in putting World of Warcraft as the number 1 most disappointing sequel ever. Because I would have much rather seen Warcraft 4 or StarCraft 2. Because, hey, if those had come out when World of Warcraft had come out, then by now we'd probably have Warcraft 5 and maybe even StarCraft 4. Think about it. Anyway, folks, that's all the time I've got for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the countdown. It was an absolute pain to create this one, which is why the footage was kind of lacking and not very involved. I had to use what I had because for some reason my computer didn't feel like letting me download anything. So hopefully the next one will look a little bit better. But until next time, peace out.